Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the week 13 reading. So, we're actually going to go in this week. Funny story. I actually revisited the syllabus, and the original reading was about quantum theories of consciousness. And I figured that having a reading on the history of quantum theory and how that applies to the philosophical and psychological, biological concept of conscious existence might be a little bit heavy. So I figured we would do this one instead. To be honest, I think this is important. It's more the consciousness stuff is related to our upcoming Thursday lecture. This is far more related to the Wednesday lecture that was released on judge and jury decision making. So I figured that it was kind of this is a nice supplement to that work, because this one paper actually really kind of covers and exemplifies what we kind of talked about, and it does many of the kind of the different tests that we talked about. It does many of those in one, so it's a nice condensed paper. And in knowledge of how busy I'm sure you all are, I will try and keep my rambling to the absolute minimum. So this paper is called "Bailing and Jailing: The Fast and Frugal Way," and what basically it's about is Mandeep Dhami, who's actually worked with Mandeep for a little while. She's a psychologist in England, and she explores decision making. So actually, a bit like me, to be honest. She just explores the realities of how people make decisions in relatively high stakes situations. So weirdly, we have some competing work on military decision making, and then where I went off and did some kind of criminal decision making work, she kind of looked at this idea of legal decision making, and really just wants to understand how lawyers or magistrates in the UK sense make decisions in criminal situations. So the introduction, in my honest opinion, if you were going to skip it, you could skip it. It's a lot of context setting. Now, the context setting is actually really important, in the sense of the way in which people make decisions is often shaped and framed by the context. So our decision-making strategies are matched to the nature of the decisions that we're being forced or asked to make. So what she basically is saying in the kind of the context sections here is just simply that there's a lot of issues in this kind of legal decision-making. So she's specifically focusing on the kind of the frequently made decision as to whether someone needs conditional bail, conditional jail, or unconditional bail or unconditional jail. And basically what she's saying is, there's a couple things here that kind of impact these decisions or make these decisions challenging. So we have the availability of information, and that's, that sometimes there isn't enough information, and that affects judging. Court procedure, time pressure, they have a heavy caseload, lack of time limits, that can affect their decision making. So there's not a lot of information, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and so we have to think about how the magistrates, what cognitive patterns they adopt in order to make these decisions. So the past research, it just kind of talks about some of the criminological work and kind of how that has approached the problem and what that's found. So you'll find down here, Morgan finds that 99% of cases in her sample where the police had decided to grant bail, magistrates also granted bail. So what Morgan basically found was that magistrates basically just copied the police. So a very frugal heuristic there being kind of what happened before, right, I'll just follow and do that. So it's just kind of outlining that there has been some work in this area, but not really by a psychologist, which is where kind of Mandeep steps in. So she starts off with a little bit of outline on kind of the research on human judgment and decision making. Now, my view would be, if you want to learn about the different approaches, of how humans make decisions, this is a very nice little kind of introduction there. But basically, what she's saying, so in the judgment analysis, and then the judgment analysis is the regression model. So those are the same things. What she's basically talking about is that kind of rational process I told you about, of kind of multiple factors co-considered together a very all-encompassing, a very all-encompassing kind of rational process of exploring all of the potential variables. And so what Mandeep does is she kind of says there's some criticisms with that on page 147, and then basically says, well, what are the other options? And here's where she kind of goes into Gigerenzer and Goldstein, kind of this idea of fast and frugal heuristics as an option. So in kind of page 148, we get to kind of, I guess, the meat of the theory, if you will, which is this kind of what are, fast and frugal heuristics. So she's kind of fast and frugal models are simple process models that do not search through all available information, do not integrate all relevant information, and base their decisions solely on one cue. So this is exactly what I walked you through in the lecture. It's kind of this idea that they are not all-encompassing, they are not information maximizers, they are frugal information satisfiers based on a single model. And then what you see in the second paragraph is Dhami's own work and Gigerenzer's work have kind of showed that if you adopt a perspective of fast and frugal decision making, what actually happens is that you end up matching or predicting human decision making relatively effectively. So the evidence reveals that fast and frugal models are equally good as compensatory integration models at correctly describing both human and simulated judgment data. So that's where they basically test a fast and frugal model. So you create that model and you run it against actual decisions in real life, and you see the degree to which you are accurately predicting what is done. So that's actually a concept that's really important to this paper, because that's what they do. So they take all of the real decision making and then they use a computer to develop what it thinks is the correct fast and frugal model, and then it compares the computer predicted outputs to the real life outputs to see how accurate the computer is, how accurate the computer's model is at predicting what actually occurred. So with this, Mandeep basically comes into case. So what are the goals of this study? So, and they're interesting. They're related to the things that we talked about in our essay. Oh, sorry, God, in our lecture. So, measure each magistrate's test-retest consistency in making bail decisions. Measure agreement between magistrates' bail decisions on the same set of cues. So that's how consistent is a magistrate when you test them once and then test them later. How consistent is a magistrate on the same set of cases, their confidence, and then the fit of the two different models. Oh, sorry. So A again. Same error I made in the lecture. A is the same magistrate making the same decision again. B is different magistrates making the same decision. So how consistent are they? And in an ideal world, we would like that to be 100%. Spoiler alert, it won't be. Confidence, and then the fit of the models. So what is the best model or decision-making strategy? What decision-making strategy best predicts the decision-making of magistrates? So first and foremost, so they sent out 270 booklets. So they did a mail survey. This is very, was this paper 2011? I think this paper's 2011. No, 2001. Very 2000. Sheesh, this is an old paper. God, I need to update my life. Anyway, it's one of my favourites. God, Mandeep's. I think the more important thing is that Mandeep is older than I realised if she's publishing in 2001. So they sent out by mail, I guess the internet didn't exist, 270 survey packages. By the way, this is how research used to be done. It used to be all done postally. I have a friend who did some research where he posted surveys to Al-Qaeda guys in prisons and just waited to see if any of them sent them back. And they got a 30% response rate, so 81 magistrates fully completed the package and sent that back to them. So in that package, they made 41 hypothetical bail decisions, and they marked their confidence. And then in each of the 41 scenarios, in Table 1, or Exhibit 1, we'll see. That's clever. I like what they've done there. They've put it Exhibit 1 instead of Table 1. That's funny. they outline the different variables that were present. So, hang on, 41 hypothetical cases, but it's only 27 bail decisions, I believe. I thought it was 27 bail decisions. Anyway, never mind. It is 27 bail decisions when you add up all of these. 18 involved males, 9 involved females, 9 were white, 9 were Asian, 9 were black, 18 were of age 18 to 20, 9 were 21 and above. So you can just see the kind of the different structures. And then this is nice. We've got the these are the acronyms in the table from the lecture that I couldn't remember. So Pol bail, police made the decision to bail them. Prosecution request, the prosecution requested that they were bailed. Previous convictions and a bail record, so they'd previously been convicted and had a previous bail decision made about them. Strength of the prosecution case, strength of community ties. Okay, so those are the variables that were manipulated in these 27 vignettes. And then, it's probably 27 vignettes with multiple bail decisions. So it might be that some of them had potentially multiple offenders. That's how we get from 41 to 27. But those are also the factors that they asked them to rank order. So if you'll remember the graph we showed in this week's lecture, there was that graph asked them their implicit and explicit rankings of the variables, and this is where they come from. So if you need that for reference, there it is. So let's go to the analysis and the result. So we've got they were given all of their stuff, the ranking task, procedure, they were given them and they filled them in. And now we're on the now we're on the analysis and the results. So let's look at the intra-magistrate consistency. So this is how consistent is a magistrate when making the same decision, when facing the exact same case again. So they took all of the cases to each individual magistrate, so 81 individual magistrates. Each one got a score basically on how consistent how often they made the same or different decision when facing the same or a different case, and that's kind of what a Cohen's kappa is basically. It's kind of like degree of consistency. And so if you look at the kind of the views about this, right? So 0.6 to 0.7 is viewed as good consistency. So the ranges were 0 to 1. So what that means is that some magistrates never made the same decision again. That's very concerning. Some magistrates made the same decision every time. In theory, that is perfect. The average was 0.69. So that's what I said in the class there. Roughly a 69% chance that they're going to make the same decision when faced with the same exact criteria and phenomena at a second time. So, I'm not entirely sure that's good, but there it is. And then interestingly, they actually run it against experience to see if they get more consistent with experience, and they find absolutely nothing. So there's no relationship between magistrate experience and how consistent the magistrate is with themselves. Agreement between magistrates, same kind of process there, but they basically look at how often do magistrates, see it is 27 cases, how often do magistrates on the 27 cases agree with each other, and basically they find a huge range from, again, like 4 to 25. So in some cases, magistrates only agreed with other magistrates on 4 of the 25 cases, which is phenomenally low. That's 16%. And in other times they agreed on all 25. So again, that would be a perfect agreement, 100%. And the mean was 14.95, so kind of slap bang in the middle there. So 50% of the time, realistically, bit over, the magistrates would agree with each other. But I suppose that the interesting thing is this is really interesting. They computed a correlation to look at the effect of experience again on the degree to which different magistrates agreed with each other, and found that the correlation was negative, meaning that as experience went up, the likelihood that they agreed with each other went down. So, I don't think that's a good finding. So, in the magistrates' bail decision-making policies, I'm just letting you know in advance, there's a lot of she compares 3 different rules or 3 different approaches, basically, to kind of calculating this decision rule. So that's Franklin and Dawes. I just wouldn't worry about those for now. You can read into them to get the concept of the paper, but it's more about how handle and predict the magistrate's decision making. And again, Franklin's rule is very much kind of rational focused, and then matching is very much our fast and frugal. So the matching heuristic, as you can see in the graph, and it's the exact same graph I showed in our lecture, is this idea of that you create a model based one variable at a time, but principally you hope that you never have to get past the first variable. So I think there's a better, no, there's not. So it would be, for example, does the individual have a previous conviction? If yes, bail. If no, if yes, jail. If no, bail. And you do that again and again and again and again and again and again and again throughout the whole thing. And you in theory, if it matches that simple decision-making rule, then you follow step one of that decision. And that's basically what a fast and frugal heuristic is. Now, if we look at Exhibit 3, I love the fact they're calling it exhibits. I've never noticed that before. If you look at Exhibit 3, then, such a move, what you'll see is how accurately the model predicts the outcomes based on the number of cues used. So as you can see there, that as you add more cues, the ability to predict decreases, which means that the most accurate model is just a single variable cue. So using one cue and not incorporating any other cues creates the most accurate model there. So it says Exhibit 4 presents the results of the average fit of the models across the sample. It can be seen that the matching heuristic provides a better fit on average across the magistrates than either Franklin's rule or Dawes' rule on the modelling set. So basically it's saying there that the fast and frugal heuristic is the best predictor of what they are going to do, and it out-predicts the other attempts that they tried, and it accurately predicts bailing and jailing decisions both within and between magistrates. And what the 92% finding is somewhere in this paper, but I think it's that it's able to predict on average 92% within a single magistrate. And I think that this might be a single model queue across the entire data set that does a 73% accuracy, which is insane. So the last kind of table here, Exhibit 5, if we will, this is where we're looking at the exactly what I walked you through in class, which is, again, the difference between the explicit policy and the implicit policy. So the explicit policy is what they said they prioritized and valued, and in what order. And the implicit policy is what the algorithm said was the most predictive or most important variables in predicting their decision making. So here you can see gender has a big role, prosecution's request has a big role, previous convictions and bail decisions have a big role. But what I think is really interesting is where you have large deviations between implicit and explicit. So implicitly, they said previous bail conditions, offence, the nature of the offence, and community support had a really big impact. But the implicit policy shows that the community support had very little impact, or was not viewed as particularly important. The community stuff was, but lesser so, and the offence stuff was way less important. So the biggest swing is definitely gender, and the nature of the offence. But it really just shows you, I think, a kind of a disconnect between either conscious narrative or conscious awareness of how they make decisions and unconscious awareness of how they make decisions, or they know how they make decisions, but then they're unwilling to verbalise the actual variables that they use to make decisions. So there's kind of two different competing approaches to how you want to interpret that finding, if you will. And so then we get to the discussion, and really what she's talking about here, and it is basically, there's a nice sample scenario in Appendix A, which is very good. Any more? No, just that one. Good. That's actually interesting to look at and get a sense of the study. She basically is talking about the implications. That if we have fast and frugal decisions being made, what does that mean for the criminal justice system? What does that mean for rationality? What do the findings of inter and intra-magistrate agreement mean? And how do we handle that? And again, it just gets to this fundamental underlying question of the whole thing is designed with the assumption of core rationality in its soul. You know, this idea that the court is the rational arbitrator that weighs all of the evidence, and then a jury of your peers convicts you and all this kind of stuff. Or in these cases, you don't have juries of peers; you just have magistrates making decisions. And so it's quite shocking and stark to see almost the irrationality or the simplicity and frugality of the decision-making strategies being used. And I think that's the power of this paper, and apparently that's why I'm still using it 20 years later. I mean, to my knowledge, I don't know of an updated version of this paper. At least if there is one, I haven't seen it. So it's why I continue to use it, because I think it's just a stark presentation on the realities of judge decision making, which I think juxtaposes quite nicely with the kind of the work we talked about on jury decision making prior to that. So with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I promise I'll keep it quick, 20 minutes in and out. There we go. But enjoy the paper, enjoy the read. There are some sections you can kind of skim through if you don't need to get into the nitty gritty of the algorithms or the different decision making models. And the take home messages are that if you were to predict a judge's decision making, you would do far better going all in on one variable and committing to that than trying to comprehend the complexity of all of each individual case on its own merit. So with that, have a wonderful week. I hope you enjoy the material, and I'm looking forward to presenting to you tomorrow. All right, goodbye everyone.